Angela Savage, and I'm Chief Executive Officer at Public Libraries Victoria, or as I like to call it, the greatest job in the world. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we all gather, in my case, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, to pay my respects to elders past and present, and to extend that respect to any people of Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander who may be joining us today. Today's a really exciting opportunity for us to learn more about this wonderful program called the Human Library. And it's my great pleasure to introduce our panel to you. Emma Misson, would you like to wave, Emma, works for the Department of Premier and Cabinet in Tasmania and has been an actual human book for more than 3 years. She's also on the board of A Fairer World, which runs the Hobart Human Libraries. Hannah Stevens, wave Hannah, is Team Leader, Library Programming and Engagement at Frankston Library. She's been working on human libraries at Frankston Libraries as part of the Southside Festival. And last but not least is Nadine Ford, Coordinator of Learning Programs, Libraries and Community Centres for Wyndham City Council. And Nadine's been working on human libraries at Wyndham as part of a pilot project over nearly a year. Please join me in welcoming our panellists. Okay, we're going to dive right in because there's a lot to get through, but I want to assure people who are in the audience of two things. One is that we will be making resources available to you after this session, and the other is that we do have a bit of time for Q&A at the end. If we don't get to all your questions, you're very welcome to contact the presenters after the session. Christine, my very able colleague, will be managing the Q&A, which is open for your participation, and we also have the chat stream open as well. Okay, so I'm going to jump in and start with Emma, because Emma, yours is an interesting story, because you, correct me if I'm wrong, you first encountered the Human Library as a participant, didn't you?
That's right. Yeah. So through work, I got invited to go along and read some books in the Hobart Human Library. And I thought it was really awesome. And yeah, kind of that was my gateway, and got talking and ended up becoming involved myself on the other side.
As a book. What was the original goal? So for your work, so it was a workplace event with the Hobart Human Library. What was the goal of that event?
It was really about, I suppose, increasing awareness and ability to have like a diverse and inclusive workplace. That's the offering that the Hobart Human Library gives to schools and workplaces, is around trying to increase skills in diversity and inclusion.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in the case of the schools program, it's actually mapped to the curriculum, isn't it?
Yeah, so there's a specific program that's run in schools that incorporates human books into the program delivery. It has other elements as well, but yeah, it's designed to fit with the curriculum.
Fantastic. Hannah, how did the goals that you were trying to achieve at Frankston compare to the ones that Emma's just outlined?
Yes, well, similar in that diversity and acceptance within our broader community. So the Southside Festival is a council-run festival. It will be in its 3rd year, and it's very much celebrating the diversity of people and all the different groups within our community. And many on here would know the stereotype of Frankston that gets bandied around, and we sort of took the human library concept, which was on our wish list of events to run, and we thought, why not incorporate that as part of this Southside Festival, which is all about celebrating different people and backgrounds and everything, and the melding pot that is Frankston. And rather than seeing it as a negative within our community of all of the different people who have got many different prejudices or experiences or problems, and actually bringing them to be able to say, hey, these people are actually amazing people within our community, and there's that chance that you might come and speak to someone that you probably could know and not actually know their background, that what they've gone through or they deal with every day. And so we really wanted to flip that whole footy show street talk persona of Frankston and actually take it and turn it into a positive for our community, which we think we absolutely did. Yeah.
Fantastic. And Nadine, in Wyndham's case, what were the goals? What made Wyndham Libraries kind of embark on the human library journey?
Yeah, well, this project kind of was the pet project of one of our lovely local councillors. So it came through our portfolio committee for council to deliver. But the real kind of overall aim of our program was to collate and share stories of community culture and history of Wyndham. We did some community engagement right at the beginning of the process, and the community kind of clearly identified that they'd like to take a real strength-based community development approach to the program. So we ended up, like, instead of kind of focusing on some of those real kind of difficult conversations, they really wanted to focus on, even if there is difficult things that happen in people's lives, what's the positive spin on that? What do we learn and what can we take away from that, and how can we share that with our communities? So we took a real community development approach, and we had corresponding kind of themes around providing community connection, increasing social capital, and also really celebrating our rich and diverse community, very similar to Hannah as well. Frankston and Wyndham have, different but also very similar communities. So we really wanted to celebrate that vibrant community as well, and also build the capacity of our residents that were involved in the program. So quite multifaceted, but yeah.
Yeah. It is interesting, that kind of spectrum of inclusion, showcasing diversity, and then also showcasing prejudice and addressing prejudice. So it seems that the human, where you situate yourself on that spectrum can shift the emphasis slightly from your program, but all are equally legitimate uses of this amazing concept. And talking of the amazing concept, so it originated in Denmark earlier this century, if I'm correct. And Hannah, Frankston decided to go down the path of affiliation. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, about the Danish model and what the benefits were for you, or why you decided to go down that path?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had obviously researched, and we knew prior to doing this that we knew a lot about the human library in Denmark, and it's spread around the world of the human libraries that have popped up using their modelling. And we decided to go down that route because we were light on for resources. It was a bit of a one-man band for quite a period of it, timeframes as well, and because we knew that we were dabbling in quite a lot of the unknown as far as who would turn up to be a book, who would come along to read, and we felt that having the organisation behind us that gave us all of the guidelines, they trained us and the books, all encompassing this might happen, and if it does, try this, and things that came up with that, that we were like, oh, we didn't even think of that, and it was there ready-made. So we turned ours around in about 6 months. Going forward for doing our one in May, we'll continue to work with the Human Library Organisation again for next year's festival, but we'll be able to probably do it in a much smaller time frame as far as recruitment goes. But yeah, we definitely needed to have their expertise to fall back on because we were such a small group of people that were running it alongside the rest of our work for, in our regular BAU. So a lot of that heavy lifting had been taken off just by being in collaboration with them.
Yep. It all makes sense, especially when you're doing it for the first time and it's it's new territory. Emma, in the Human Library, the Hobart Human Library, as I mentioned, is run by A Fairer World. Was there originally a link with the Danish Human Library, or have you kind of branched out and worked on your own program, given the focus of the organisation on workplace and education settings?
I actually don't know exactly how much relationship there was between a Fair World and the Danish sort of or international organisation in the first place. But that was definitely the inspiration for the Hobart Human Library. And it started in 2013 with a bunch of not-for-profits getting together and sort of setting it up. And a Fair World has then sort of become the owner of or the administrator of it. And we've kind of further developed it and embedded it into workplace and school training so that it has a kind of ongoing place instead of it just being a one-off that then has a whole range of benefits in that, it gives lots of people access to the stories, which is great. It also means that there's sort of ongoing role for books who've gone through training to then go and present, and even like books are paid an honorarium as well in our model. So there's a level to which it can actually be really useful for books and in having that as part of their lives.
And good for their CV. And is it a fee-for-service program that you guys run at a Fair World?
It is. It's a little bit complicated though. We have sort of different funding streams, and we have a bit of a relationship with our Department for Education, Children and Young People. So state schools, the model for how much they have to pay and that sort of thing is a lot different to if it was a private school or a private workplace.
Interesting. And Nadine, you've got another model that you've used at Wyndham, and I think this is really interesting because it's a classic example of one size not fitting all. So tell us how you didn't affiliate with the Danish Human Library organisation. Tell us how you went about it.
Yeah, so there's a couple main reasons why we decided not to go down that path. The first one is something that program managers face all the time, is time. So I started working on the project over December and January, which we know are classic, close down periods in local government and in the sector generally. So we had that kind of going against us. And in January, Hannah very kindly shared some of her expertise and experience with me when I was very early on the job. And I quickly kind of realized that the process of kind of engaging the Human Library organisation and to when we were hoping to start recruiting our residents as living books and to run events, it just simply wasn't going to align. So that was one big part of the reason, was just purely timing. The other reason was we also realised that the Human Library organisation has quite a specific objectives, and they have a very specific model about how they like to deliver their program. And because we were developing this project as a pilot, we really wanted to kind of trial some different ways of doing things. So we wanted to work with different cohorts of the community. We wanted to work with people in a slightly different way, and we really wanted to embed that capacity building approach as well by delivering like a proper training program. And we also wanted to trial some community visits and run some community events and go into different settings. So because of that, we decided that we would use it as an inspiration, and we would kind of spread that here, there and everywhere, but we wouldn't go down the model of getting licensed. So It did provide us a lot more flexibility in how we delivered the program, which I think could work for a lot of other people too.
And when you talk about different cohorts, you mentioned earlier, so you were targeting children in some of the program delivery, in adults some of the delivery. You did some aged care settings, is that right?
Yeah. So we ran a series of events and community visits over this year. We went into schools, so we did some kind of readings with 2 classrooms there. We went and council runs planned activity groups with seniors, so that was a great partnership with that team to kind of go in and talk to seniors. And we also ran a series of events, and we ran some family targeted community dinners too. So we've done a kind of bit of a variety of things to kind of test what works. And it's funny, my observation there is depending on what kind of cohort you have, will also depend on how you want to run the event, because in comparison to when we went into schools and talked to young people, in comparison when we went into the seniors groups much more wanted to kind of share their own life experiences and have more of that conversation, but also share their own knowledge and kind of insights and different thoughts about how they've lived their lives. So it was a really kind of interesting way of looking at things, going and talking to different groups.
And then you do have to plan differently for those contingencies, don't you?
Yes, or
interesting.
just
Very
change
interesting.
things along the way.
I want to ask you all about how you recruit the human books. So, Emma, you having stepped up as a human book, how was that process for you? And is it still the way that the Hobart Human Library recruits human books?
Well, my recruitment was just sort of by chance of talking to someone who was staff at a Fairer World and being like, oh, I'm already a speaker with another organisation, and away it kind of went. So there's a little bit of opportunistic recruitment for sure, or people kind of going, oh, I've got a friend, they might be great at this. So that's sort of one stream. But we do also try and foster relationships with other local organisations. For example, like we've had a relationship with a local organisation focused on LGBTIQA+ rights that's then meant that we've got some people in from that organisation to do training, and sort of other relationships like that are kind of how we try and cover off on the full range that is diversity and inclusion.
So people can self-select, or you can tap people on the shoulder, basically.
Yeah,
through your partnerships.
Yeah, but it's all voluntary. People are given kind of, you can even do the training and then decide actually it's not for me. And I suppose we take the view that the training is still, worthwhile because it does build capacity, because people get that experience in thinking about how to craft their story, how to answer questions, and people can go on after the training to do other things. It can help with getting jobs and that sort of thing. So
sure. And is that training delivered face-to-face or online, or both?
Oh, I think mostly face-to-face, but it can be done in both ways. And at the moment, I think it's over 2 days, sort of the first day very focused on crafting story, and the second day more focused on the part where you do Q&A and you're engaging directly with people, and how to do that safely and safely for you as a book and for your audience. Yeah.
Excellent. Nadine, how did you go about recruiting your human books in Wyndham?
Yeah, so we delivered the project in kind of 2 phases. So the first phase, we really wanted to contain it, and I guess we took a similar approach to Emma, where we utilised our partnerships. We know that at council we have many teams who have very close relationships with many kind of engaged community members, community leaders, networks, organisations, groups, etc. So we did take more of that tapping on the shoulder approach for the first phase. Which meant that we got some really lovely engaged community members keen to take part in our very kind of first run pilot. We did do a second phase of the program where we did do more public recruitment, we did all the normal things that council does, is advertise in our paper, social media and emails and various kind of council channels, and then we also tried to kind of do that similar approach where we also kind of tap people on the shoulder. What was interesting that I noticed is with the different kind of groups and the way that we're recruited, because you are kind of relying on self-selection to a degree, the community that was joined to the first round and the second round were quite different. So we did find that a lot of the people involved in the second round that were self-selecting were, a bit more of a younger cohort, right in their, middle of their careers, very, very kind of passionate and educated, and we had many people, local authors, wanting to get involved and really want to kind of give back to the community in their own kind of profession and personal experience as well. So it was quite interesting kind of comparing the different kind of recruitment and the strategies we use and what kind of people we ended up with as well.
And you ran the training yourself for the books.
Yeah, so we ran, so we offered through the recruitment phase as well. We also kind of offered them a one-on-one, either online or face-to-face meeting, so we could talk to them a bit more about the project and what to expect and stuff like that. We also ran some information sessions as well. So we're trying to give people a lot of information on our website and get people well informed to what they were interested in. And then we offered a 3-evening training in our library. So it was over kind of a Tuesday or a Wednesday night, about 6:30 to 8:30, just enough time for people to kind of come in after work. We provided dinner. We took a real, kind of informal approach, but it was really focused on getting to know each other. As similar to Emma, opportunity to write their story on a page, their discussion points, practice in the group, and we also weaved in stuff around, promoting libraries, the work of council, what the program's about, that safety and wellbeing element, some public speaking kind of tips and tricks along the way as well. So 3 sessions sounds like a lot, but they're only 2 hours each, and we tried to make it kind of fun and informal as well. And by the end of those sessions, I would say that one of the biggest benefits and outcomes from that process is the relationships and the connection that the living books kind of formed for themselves through that process. Like, everyone was hugging each other and taking photos, and it was really kind of nice to see that.
That's lovely. Hannah, how did you go? I think you've got another approach again to how you went about identifying your human books.
We were probably a little of both of what Nadine and Emma have touched on. So, as we said, we really didn't know what we were going to expect. We thought we'd either get inundated or we'd have absolutely nothing. So we put it out as completely voluntary, which is the concept of it, but also had a little bit of money in the bank that if we had to start bribing with cash, we would. We didn't have to do that. So we initially went out just on our social media, our e-news, and a bit of work like through council, other groups within our council organisation. And straight off the bat, we got, I think, about 35 EOIs come back, which was incredible. And they were a huge range of different people and topics. And so from that, we were then I was getting phone calls from Peninsula Health, like their mental health departments, where they had different connections within their organisation. And so they were like, this is what we're thinking. Can we tap these people on the shoulder and send them over? Our community strengthening department brought a lot of our books in for us. We are lucky to be right next to Youth Central, and we've got a very good relationship with those guys over there. So they run a youth LGBTQI plus group there as well. And so the diversity of people that came in was incredible. We didn't really at that point have to go and tap anyone on the shoulder. We sort of had some ideas of some topics that we would like to have that we knew in our community that if we had to go down that path, we could. But for our first one, because we kept it as a single day, we kept it very tight. We had 15 books across 3 sessions, so 3 sessions of 5, just so we could keep that control around how it all ran. For that first time, we filled those spots really quickly. After we got the EOIs in, we did a quick phone conversation with the applicants just to make sure. Some of them didn't really have any idea what they had put their hand up for, didn't quite grasp the concept. I did have one bloke that just wanted to talk about the local cricket club. I was like, oh, not quite, but thank you.
We're not looking for sporting books at this point.
Yeah, not quite this one. And then we did a formal interview, which for accessibility, we offered both as a Zoom meeting or in person if they wanted and were able to come in. And that was pretty much 25 minutes, half an hour for them to be able to ask any questions that they had, clarify anything, similarly like Nadine, for us to give that information of what it actually, the concept, the goals, why we're doing it and how it would run. And then they'd do their training. And so the online training was provided by the Human Library Organisation. They were emailed a portal login for them to go in. It was all at their own pace. So we got that to them about a month out. So they had plenty of time to complete it. I think in total it was like 5 hours worth of work, and they could knock that over as however that worked best for them. Those that needed a hand we booked out rooms in our library and had them come in and sit down and do their training in the library if they needed help, especially if they were low literacy or digital literacy. And they loved it. And it also meant that they got ties in with the Human Library Organisation. And I think about 3 of our books have now done online books and readings with people around the world. So they've had that connection that they're actually continuing to do it. And like Nadine said, the connection between our books, we did a meet and greet morning tea in Frankston Library the Monday before the event on the Saturday, and we put on morning tea and everything for everyone to come in so that they could see the space, see where they were going to be seated, where the readings would take place, and to meet each other. And it was so beautiful. Like, they all are now friends and chat with each other, and so it was definitely created another little community within our community. And the support, I still get emails and everything. I've actually got a couple of our books that are doing another whole event for us later in November, so they've sort of gone, yep, we'll jump in and do that now.
Right. And so I can see that's another advantage of going through the Denmark Human Library Organisation, because they have the opportunity then to move into the digital space and become digital books, which is amazing. Yep. And Emma, I saw you nodding furiously about when Hannah and Nadine were talking about that building of community among the human books. So it's been your experience as well?
Absolutely, yeah. Some of the most amazing people I've ever met are the other human books, and it's so lovely to go to events and get to catch up with them. And I've had the privilege of listening to lots of the other stories as well. And so my story is about having an invisible disability. So it's particularly connecting with other people who have lived experience of disability is like so valuable in terms of just managing my own life. So it's great. I've done some like sort of job like mentoring with another book was looking at sort of trying to get into the government sector. So there's a lot of value and richness that comes out of the relationships between books.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Not even something that you would necessarily think of when you embarked on this kind of program, and yet obviously a really strong element for all 3 of you.
Angela,
yes,
just jump in one more thing. That comment that Hannah made about the when you go and recruit people and some people just don't really get the idea and don't really know what they're signing up for. I just wanted to say, like, that was 100% our experience too. And between the first and second phase, that was one of my biggest learnings, was like, we need to get really specific good information out for people, and offering that one-on-one opportunity to meet and talk to them was really important. And what I noticed, I'm not sure if Hannah, you noticed too, but going into 2024 and offering an opportunity like this in a council election year was quite interesting, because I did notice, particularly, when I saw the candidates come out and who was going up for election, I was like, oh, I recognise quite a few of those now. And so just a consideration when you do a project in an election year is just going through that important process to make sure that you're not just recruiting people that want to elevate themselves in their profiles.
Thankfully we didn't. I think because we were so much earlier in the year, a lot of our EOIs were towards the end of last year. I think, again, we've just timed that perfectly, that we're not opening our EOIs at the moment. But we definitely had one of those points, which was around that code of ethics within the human library. And we have the pillars, as what they call, of the pillars of prejudice, and that's how you sort of pick your books to make sure you've got a good variety as well, but they have got that understanding, and one of them is no self-promotion. So whether that is for their own, it could even be for their own not-for-profit or their own business, or political standpoint, that it is very much they're talking about their experience that is past, done, finished in some ways, or well established, that they've got a clear understanding, and they're not putting themselves up for any further scrutiny or worsening that prejudice potentially if they haven't fully processed what their issue is. But yeah, it is a big one, because it definitely, we had a few like that you're like, yeah, you're not helping anyone but yourself.
So I think the lesson here is, you know, as you say, twofold. It's on the one hand being really clear in your communications about what it is that you're looking for, and on the other, you know, doing that vetting process. I mean, to extend the metaphor of the human library, you know, your collections curators, you just don't take anything into your collections. You consider it carefully, and you consider it in terms of your community and what kind of demand is in your community, which brings me to my next question, a quick question, which is what human books have proved the most popular in your communities? I think, Emma, it's probably a bit tricky for you because you mix them up on different panels, but do you get a sense that there are particular stories or particular books that really intrigue people, or, you know, say, and is there a difference between what the kids are really kind of fascinated by in the school setting and what the interests are among adults in the workplace settings?
Yeah, I was going to say it really depends on the setting. Like, we have a book who was a world-class mountaineer who then got hit by a boulder climbing in Tasmania and has a brain injury. And that is a great story for like your year 9 boys. Because they're, you know, doing all their sports and they're all active, and Paul is, you know, this example of, you know, a person who's had that kind of really cut short but has this amazing attitude to life. So there's definitely different things that resonate in different places. I think the stories about, like, my story, for example, often will resonate in workplaces where people will be existing in that workplace as a staff member with an invisible illness, whether that's mental illness or a physical illness, and hearing me talk about my experience and navigating that in the context of work then sometimes sets up a safe enough space that they might disclose their experience, or, you know, someone will come up afterwards and be like, oh, it's so reassuring to hear that someone else is muddling their way through that. So yeah, it is very dependent on audience, I would say, but there's always something that clicks with people.
Sure. Hannah, what about in your case? Did you have any sort of, like, you know, standouts in terms of demand or in terms of bookings or in terms of feedback?
We were really surprised, actually. So we had, as I said, 15 different books. And the one that booked out first was not the one that we thought would, which was English as a Second Language. And again, I suppose it's just, you know, being in this community setting and seeing all these people that you sort of think, well, that's probably, surely we've moved past that as a thing. But Frankston, the community that it is, and, you know, we are traditionally still very Anglo-Saxon, but we are building in that multicultural environment very quickly. And so we did realise that there is a lot of people in our community that have probably never moved outside of Frankston community, and that understanding of someone coming and having English as their second language is something that they want to know more about, and they want to know how to help navigate or understand how they navigate their own days. Aside from that was the mental health side of things. So an adult diagnosed ADHD, that was high demand. And one of our books was Living with Schizophrenia. And Linda was amazing. She was so open. She was an open book, and there was no question that she wouldn't answer. And it was wonderful. The feedback from that was brilliant. But also as well, we had a few books that didn't have full booked out. They weren't fully reserved. And on the day, people might have booked in to read one book and then saw the others and stayed to speak with other people, which was incredible, because that was probably even more interesting, because they were ones that wasn't what they thought they were going to come to talk about. And then when they sat down with the second or third book, they were just like, minds were blown that they were so expanded in their thinking. But yeah, our variety of people, we definitely steered away from religion-based things with the timing of everything, but we didn't have anyone that had sort of put their hand up in that space. But yeah, we had a transgender, we had a parent of a transgender child and their experience. So it was a really good mix, and we had all of our books had probably at least 75% reserved before the event started.
Fantastic. So interesting, isn't it?
Mm.
Nadine, how about you? What were the popular books in Wyndham?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a different, we took a slightly different approach to how we did our readings with our living books. So at all of our community events and visits, we didn't actually offer the opportunity to do them one-on-one. We did them in small groups. There was a couple of reasons for that. One was we had community feedback right at the beginning of the project that they would prefer that. They prefer to do it in small groups. So we thought we would trial that approach. Another reason was because it's, that classic bang for buck approach. So we were going to reach more people by offering it in a small group opposed to one-on-one. And the living books also really loved that. They were always like, how many people are we going to be talking to tonight? Like, let's make it worth my time kind of thing. So that was another reason. The other reason, which I learned through the process, I didn't kind of pick up beforehand, was that popularity game, and that feeling that some people may want people to talk to them and other people may not. So just kind of managing that kind of expectation and not creating that scenario where that may occur and people may feel left out and all the other things that come with that. So I can't really say what was our most popular book, but because of the way that we did the program, and the stories that we generally recruited in the end, a lot of them were refugees and migrant communities that have moved to Wyndham. So they were all from a whole variety of countries and different cultures. And so they were talking about their experiences of migrating to Australia and different things that have happened in their life, what's happened along the way, different adversity, different experiences, and how they're connecting with the local community. So it was a whole variety of different kind of, obviously everyone's different, so everyone brings different experiences to that. But yeah, I can't kind of comment on it most popular, but I would say that people that really thought about their messaging and were genuine and vulnerable with their storytelling were the ones that I noticed people were kind of really connecting with the most as well.
So interesting. Again, really interesting to hear the different perspectives and different approaches and the values of each one's. Before we met today to start this session, I said to the three of you, we could easily run this for several hours. There's so much that we could talk about. And unfortunately, we don't have that much time. But I thought I might ask one more question, then we might open to Q&A and then come back together at the end. And now it's like a matter of, which question do I ask? Okay, I think I know which question I'll ask at the end. So I want to ask how you, in your various models of the human library, how you create a safe space for people's curiosity. And Emma, we might start with you.
Yeah, sure. So we run our program in sort of a few different ways, but a sort of common part of every different iteration of it is setting some sort of ground rules at the beginning before we let readers go to books and start that fun part of the process. So generally, we do set up some ground rules about respect and sort of what we expect of our readers, but also, making sure that they're safe and they know that, if they're feeling distressed, they're welcome to step out at any point, making sure that they know that they're like who the people are, who they can go to if they need support. So generally we'll have a staff member from a fairer world as a librarian, so sort of doing the rounds to make sure that there's a person who people can can go and speak to. And if a book is feeling uncomfortable, they can kind of signal to the librarian, hey, this is getting a bit intense, I need a bit of help. And then obviously, like when we're in schools, there'll generally be a teacher and potentially multiple teachers present, so that the students have multiple points of call. And workplaces will often have like an employee assistance program and other resources that we can point people to as well. So it's, yeah, that dual focus of making sure that books are safe and making sure that audience members are safe as well.
Fantastic. Hannah, how did you go about it?
Yeah, very similarly, in that we had what we called our rules of engagement. So as both, obviously that was covered with our training, with our books themselves. And we also made sure that the books were aware that at any point through the process, even up to 5 minutes before the event started, if they did not feel comfortable, they did not have to go through with it. There was no judgment, the whole concept of it. There was absolutely, no worries there whatsoever. And we then had, when we took the reservations and the bookings, everyone had to give their full details. We needed to have a contact number, and then they had to agree to the rules of engagement at that point of when they booked. So we used our event booking system to do that. So it was almost like they, pretty much, if they were going to be coming in with an ulterior motive, they were really put off that at the start. And then as everyone came in, we would double check that they would have another read. If they were walk-ins, we had a copy of it there for them to read, agree to, and before they sat down. So similarly, they were told if there were any of our books could flag questions that they didn't want to be asked, and we would flag that with the readers before they sat down. Again, we had librarians of event staff, and there was at least 3 of us walking around where the readings were taking place. We held it in the library in our study area. So the library was still functioning as normal. For the rest of it, we did have it all cordoned off. So it was still an area away where the public couldn't hear what was going on, but it wasn't completely secluded either. So I think that had a sense of safety also. And if at any point a book or a reader was uncomfortable, they could flag to one of the librarians and we would step in. But we were also there to listen out in the event that if we knew that book didn't like that question being asked and that conversation sounded like it was going down that path, as librarians, we were able to just do a little check-in, redirect the conversation, all of those sort of things. So it was very much kept in close contact and close, watching.
Yep.
And it's setting those ground rules is the biggest thing, because you get a very good sense of people from that, and having that quick conversation with readers is to make sure that they're there for the right reasons.
Sure. And can I just ask, did you have to be a Frankston Library member to borrow the books?
No.
Okay.
No, we opened it up to everyone because it was part of the festival, we wanted to make sure that that was a big thing, that we wanted to make sure that anyone who might not have ever stepped foot into the library could access it and be able to see the diversity and the acceptance within that library space, that hopefully they would come back again. But we had people travelling down from the city to come to it that had taken part with Human Libraries online. We actually had one reader, she had been in the country for all of 3 hours. And she was in a wheelchair herself, and she had jumped online. She toured around, like she was touring the world, and she jumped online and looked for disabled, like safe space disabled events that she could go to that day.
Wow.
And the Human Library came up and she jumped on the train and came down. It was incredible. Yeah.
Fantastic. Amazing story. And Nadine, in your case,
very similar to Emma and Hannah. We did a code of conduct. We made that available as part of the recruitment process, and once they were selected, we did some like an information book and pre-reading, so we included it in that, talked about it in the training. We also had very similar processes in place for our events and community visits. put a hand up if you're feeling uncomfortable having staff going around doing check-ins, etc. So we tried to do all that. The only thing I'd probably add is we also had like a printed list of support services available as well. So if readers were uncomfortable or needed further information, and we also shared that with our living books through the training, they could access kind of counselling and other services as well. I think the difference between our program and the other programs is like there was, because we took more of a strength-based approach, like some of the conversations I would expect may not have been as
intense.
Intense. And so we and that was kind of partly on purpose as part of the pilot, wanting to kind of contain the trial, the pilot approach. So sure. I think if the program was going to continue, like we would need to maybe kind of revisit that and look and grow on that approach and make sure that we are keeping everybody safe and and there's lots of things that we can put in place and learn.
Fantastic. Well, look, I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience for a little while, just while we've got time. As I mentioned, Christine's been monitoring the Q&A. Do we have any? Let's have a look. Just opening that up now. All right. So, for someone new to the concept, how could you each talk a little bit about borrowing books? How do people borrow books? Is it a group conversation or one-on-one? Is a conversation a set format? I think we've kind of covered that. And I know we've got some more guidelines. But is there anything that you would like to add in terms of the actual sort of borrowing mechanisms?
I think it is dependent on the program style that you deliver. As I said, we used our event booking system to keep it controlled, but it will depend on which avenue you go with. There's multiple different styles you can choose under the Human Library organisation if you were to run with them. And I know, obviously Nadine has a different way of doing it with their group and multiple different ways of doing it. So it would just be dependent on how you chose to run your event.
Yes, and I kind of, again, the metaphors abound really with something like this, don't they? Because you've got your borrowing in kind, your hard copy, which is your face-to-face conversation. You've got your digital borrowing option when people move their stories online, and you've got the book club option, which kind of is almost the model that Wyndham's adopted. So again, no one size fitting all. I really like that idea. I've got a question here from Jess. Have you had any First Nations people as books, and how did that go? Emma, have you had First Nations people at Hobart?
We have at least one, although they often speak about another aspect of their experience, but it enables us to really lean into our organisation's values when we introduce our sessions, because Asta will often do a acknowledgement of country for us. It's probably an area we could look to expand more into. We have quite a lot of books in the sort of disability space, quite a lot of books in the LGBTIQA plus space, and then the sort of culturally and linguistically diverse space. Yeah.
How about Hannah or Nadine? Have you had First Nations books, Deadly Reads?
Yes. Similarly, we didn't have anyone for this event that we ran in May. However, post-event, speaking with some of the other organisations, especially the First Nations organisations that we deal with on a regular basis, that we work with, they had expressed their interest in the concept. But again, like Emma sort of said, that a lot of the time that's not what they want to talk about either as well. So they are on, someone with that experience of the prejudice is definitely on our tap on the shoulder list, but a way of being able to do that without it being too pointed or tokenistic, or you must have a horrible story to tell, or want to tell that, or want to talk about it. It is a bit of that managing expectations within it.
Nadine, anything to add?
Yeah, so we didn't have a First Nations person sign up as a living book either, but we did run some supporting programs as part of this overall project. And so we did do a partnership with our early years team to incorporate an activity into the school holidays earlier in the year. And we took that as an opportunity to provide families with young children an opportunity to learn about First Nations culture and stories in a different way. So we engaged a Bunurong elder who used to live in the community. He came and did a welcome to country, and then performed the Yidiki and talked a bit about the importance of the Yidiki to their community and how to learn it. And they did a bit of a Q&A about that. We also had a local Torres Strait Islander community leader come along as well, and she talked about her community and some stories, and she shared some of her cultural stories and musical instruments as well. So we kind of did that in a slightly different way, but we wanted to kind of look at that. And part of the reason we did that as well is because our living books are volunteers. They're they weren't paid to be a part of this project, and we also kind of this kind of type of approach, they were paid to share their culture and community with us. And it was this idea of like, if you're learning from people's lived experience, then it's, the approach that you take can look quite different to how you've taken the program. So we wanted to kind of acknowledge that.
That's a really important point about compensation for stories as well, and a particularly sensitive issue for our First Nations people who are expected to donate a lot of emotional labour and shouldn't be, in my opinion. A quick question for you, Nadine, from Pia. You mentioned small group scenarios. How many people were generally in each reading, please?
Yes. So in reality, we had between 5 and 8 community members. Actually, I think one of the events we might have even had 10. And I would say that a good size would be about 6 to 7 people. So whenever I was allocating the amount of living books to a visit or an event, I would always go with a number of about 5 or 6, hoping for a little bit more. And I was just going to add to that around, I think that question before around, registration and stuff like that. We actually did have a bit of a process because we didn't have those one-on-one. We had small groups, and we didn't even offer the opportunity for them to self-select their group. We just put people into groups in the registration process. That has its positives. It might have its cons as well. It's, nothing's perfect, but so when we had people come to events, they had like a name badge. They would be able to write their name on it. We had reader on it, the name of the event, and they would also have kind of 2 coloured dots. And when we did the introductions at the beginning of the session with the living books, they would have their dots on them. So we would go through this process of kind of allocating people to the groups as they arrived, which one tries to make the process a little bit easier, but also stops that inability for everybody to choose one person and then other people to feel left out and not be picked.
Sure. So again, so interesting, the different kind of ways of managing logistics and expectations. And I did mention at the beginning of the session that there's some great resources that have been developed by the different organisations that have been involved in human libraries, including a sort of manual, a how-to that Hannah's developed for Frankston that people are very happy to share. So we'll be sending those out following the panel discussion today, together with the recording. But we've got just enough time. I really wanted to ask you all about impact and evaluation, and I'm going to roll 2 questions into one, which is how you measure the success and impact of the human library, and whether you've got any special moments from readers that you could share with us. Hannah, we might start with you.
Yeah, so we had our formal evaluation. So both our readers and our books completed formal feedback forms about their experience, what they liked, what they didn't like, what they would want to see different. all of those, and that all got fed back to the Human Library organisation, as well as what we took from it to be able to do for our next event. But the key stuff that we got was our vox pops that we did sort of after the fact. So as our readers departed, we asked them if they were happy to do a little video on camera for us to ask their experience. And yeah, the things that we got out of that, like I said, there was a girl that had come down. She'd done a couple of online books with the Human Library organisation, and morning of, she dragged her best friend down from Collingwood, and they came down, and I think they read every book there across the day. They just loved it and they raved about it. We had so much for people to be able to just say that feedback of, I see myself in that person, and the strength that they've taken from that person sitting down and sharing their story so candidly. I think that is probably something that is completely measurable. On that, we did have counsellors at the time come in, and one of those counsellors went on to nominate one of our books as our Local Citizen of the Year.
Wow.
And was just recently awarded an award for their work in the disability sector. And so it's continued to be talked about a lot after the fact. And our books themselves, we also interviewed afterwards, and I took portrait photos as well of them, so that over the events we can sort of collect the catalogue of our books that we've had, and the anthology of those stories that we can put together with a short blurb to be able to say, for prosperity, basically, to be able to have these people. And they were all, everyone should do this, no matter what you think, how big or small you think that story is. You need to do this and put yourself out there. There was no one that walked away from it saying, oh my God, I could never do that again. They were literally, every single one of them was like, if you need more books next year, we're back. We're going to do it again. And
that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's
fantastic.
the biggest thing.
Emma, what's just to answer those two questions as well, the impact evaluation and any kind of moment that stands out for you?
So, I mean, similar to what Hannah's described, we get readers and books to fill in feedback forms at the end of any workshop or session that we've run. Some of that is number ratings of how good it was, and some of that is free text sections. So we get lovely quotes that we can then use when we're promoting our programs, that sort of thing. And anything that we need to work on improving, we'll look at what we can put in place to kind of continuously improve our programs. We do also get that sort of more just as it happens feedback at the end of sessions where people come up and want to have more of a chat. When we go into schools, what we often do is, as the students leave, the books sort of stand at the door, and we get them to tell us, like, what's one thing you're going to do differently now that you've heard these stories, and they get a bookmark when they tell us. So that's a really nice way of collecting some of their ideas and getting them to put what they've heard into action. And I think we have also had someone who works in the kind of review and evaluation space come and sort of formally review our programs as well. So there's a whole bunch of stuff there. I kind of alluded to this earlier, but a moment from me sharing my story that stays with me is this was in a workplace, and I'd talked about my illness, and this man, I don't know, men don't tend to be very forthcoming often, but this man put his hand up in this virtual space with all of his colleagues and started speaking about how difficult his experience with long COVID had been, which had quite a lot of similarities with my illness. And that then, opened up this space where other people were kind of jumping in, and this whole conversation started as a result of me sharing, that I imagine then continued, after I'd sort of, left the virtual room, that it, opened up space for his colleagues to then figure out what they can do to support him in returning to work and all of that kind of thing.
Fantastic.
And I suppose, we know as books how much courage it can take to share our stories. So it's really amazing to see someone else put their hand up and be open as well.
It's a fantastic story. Nadine, we've got virtually no time, but I know that at the beginning you mentioned that because the program was a pilot, you're going to be evaluating it, and we would love to see that evaluation if you can share it. But is there just one standout moment you wanted to share to finish up with?
Well, exactly the same with Emma and Hannah in terms of our process, but I guess the standout for me was like the value of running the training with the living books and seeing the confidence grow, the connections grow, and just the ability to provide that space and that time and that training to really help with people's professional and personal development has been really amazing. So I think from a living books perspective and taking that approach, that's been a real standout for me, and wasn't a surprise, but it was a surprise, if you know what I mean. How much it kind of helped people and how much they enjoyed that process.
Fantastic. And look, there's lots of wonderful feedback coming through the chat. People have found this session very informative and inspirational, and are thanking all of you for sharing what you've done, what you've gone through, and also I think thank you in advance for offering to provide some follow-up and support. As we mentioned at the beginning, we'll be sending out some resources and also make an edited version of this recording this session available to everyone who's attended and those who registered but couldn't attend. But please, before we go, join me in thanking our outstanding panelists today, Emma, Nadine, and Hannah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
And we'll be in touch with future plans for more lunchtime sessions. Thanks so much, everyone.